Welcome back to another video in the Carl video series. My name is Rob from Ahead Simulations, and today we're going to be walking you through step by step how to calibrate Carl and how the calibration feature works within the software. A few things to note about calibrating. Carl, it never requires a technician to come and recalibrate your Carl at a certain frequency. We have a calibration feature inside of the software which will use your calibrated audiometer to calibrate your Carl. So we're assuming that when you're using Carl for audiometry or masking, you are going to be using a calibrated audiometer for that. So we're going to calibrate our Carl to your audiometer, and I'll walk you through that in a moment. Another thing to note about calibration, calibration is only needed for audiometry and masking, and it is not needed if you're just going to be doing recording or hearing loss simulation through the recording feature. So now to dive in, I'll walk you through our user interface here. So what you see is the calibration page right here. When you click on this, it will take you to this screen to calibrate your Carl. Now, a few things to note. At the top right, it tells me when Carl was last calibrated and to what transducer it was calibrated to. Especially for masking, the performances are a little bit different depending on the transducer that you choose, and the intraoral attenuation values will differ as well. So be sure that when you're calibrating your Carl, you're calibrating it for a particular environment and a particular audiometer and transducer. So when I click begin calibration here, Carl is going to read the noise floor of my environment to determine how loud is my environment and for him to make any corrections that are needed. It's important to note here that Carl should be already set up right now with the transducer on him and properly placed. If it's an insert phone, make sure that it's expanded enough as it would on a patient, and beginning calibration will more or less solidify the setup that you have. So I'm going to do that right now and then stay quiet for a few moments. So Carl just recorded my noise floor. You can see even though I'm not in a sound booth, I'm in an office type environment, my sound levels in my noise floors are actually very, very good. So you can see the left ear at each frequency, this is what the noise floor is, and the right ear at each frequency, what the noise floor is. So this will be taken into account for the calibration standards and the calibration inside of Carl, and it'll also be taken into account to determine what kinds of audiograms you can test. Of course, looking at these numbers, you won't be able to give Carl, a 10 dB HL loss across every single frequency because the noise floor right now at 750 is 15. So that will show you what audiograms you can use in your environment, with the gold standard case being in a double-walled sound booth. So I'm going to click accept. You can see I have the transducer before previously calibrated to circumoral, but I'm going to recalibrate it for transducers, or for inserts, sorry. So be sure that you make this correct selection up here, as this will determine how Carl reacts and how his intraoral attenuation will adapt when especially you are doing masking. So right now at the top, it's presenting me with instructions to present a 70 dB HL signal at 250 Hertz on the left ear for 2 to 3 seconds. You can see the hourglass right here. It's telling us that that's the frequency that we have to do first. And right here where Carl currently hears, that's where it's telling you what it hears. So it's jumping around quite a bit because I'm talking right now and because of my environment, but with my iPad-based audiometer that I have right now, I'm going to be presenting these tones throughout. So again, the left ear at 250 at 70 dB HL, I'm going to hold that. And you can see when I hold that, what Carl currently hears is consistent. So he's hearing a consistent 250 Hertz at 69 dB HL. You can see the hourglass has now moved on to 500 Hertz, and there was a number of 1 placed in the 250 column. That is because he was hearing 69, but we know that the calibrated audiometer is outputting 70. So he applies an offset at 1, and we go frequency to frequency to determine these correction values. So I'm going to hop through them pretty quickly here, and you'll see that along the way, Carl is calculating his values once he gets a stable number that he hears. So that you can be sure when you're doing audiometry and masking with Carl that he is responding properly. So you can see all these values are quite low. Sometimes these values will be a little bit larger, and that's no cause for concern. We do factory calibrate it before it leaves our facility, but sometimes, depending on your environment and depending on your transducer, you may have values that are not in the 1 or 2s, but might even be, low double digits. So again, no concern there. The really only thing to be aware of is if during a hearing test or during masking, Carl is behaving very erratic or responding not as you would expect, that's something to just keep in mind and revisit when you look at the calibration. So you can see we're almost there. It really doesn't take too long, just a couple of minutes to walk through this. And once I do the last one, you'll see at the top, successfully calibrated device, and again it shows those noise floor values that we had talked about before. So again, 15 dB it looks like is the highest that we have, which is great for this environment that we're in right now, and you can tell that the rest of the frequency should be quite straightforward to test with Carl. So when I click accept, Carl is calibrated, everything is set up properly. You can see the last calibration has been set up to the specific date and time that I calibrated it just now, and specifically for the transducer. Last thing I'll say before I go is that calibration is needed whenever you change environments for Carl that are drastically different, or you change audiometers or transducers. So if Carl is set up in a sound booth and that sound booth environment is not changing and you're using the same transducer, there really shouldn't be any kind of frequency that you need to recalibrate it to. It should be pretty set. But again, if you see that Carl is responding a little bit strange, there may be a need to recalibrate it. Obviously, if you're changing environment, if you're going from a sound booth to an office environment, or we've even demoed Carl at a noisy conference room, you will need to recalibrate that, and you'll need to make sure that it's calibrated for the transducer that you chose at the time. So hopefully that gives you everything that you need to know about your calibration. Be sure to check out our other videos for all the other functionality of Carl Pro. And if there's any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to a member of our team.